The air was crisp that morning in downtown Atlanta. The streets bustled with the usual mix of locals heading to work, tourists snapping photos of Centennial Olympic Park, and street vendors hawking their goods. Among the crowd was a tall, sharply dressed black man in his early 40s. His tailored navy blue suit and polished leather shoes made him stand out against the casual vibe of the city streets. A Rolex glinted on his wrist as he adjusted his tie, exuding a quiet confidence. He was on his way to an important meeting at City Hall, a meeting that could change the future of affordable housing in Atlanta. But what began as a promising day quickly spiraled into a nightmare. As Jamal Anderson crossed the street near Peachtree Center, he noticed two uniformed officers standing by a patrol car. Their eyes followed him, their expressions unreadable. He'd lived in Atlanta long enough to recognize the unease that came with being scrutinized for no apparent reason. Jamal kept his pace steady and his eyes forward, determined not to give them any excuse to stop him. "Sir, stop right there," one of the officers barked. Jamal froze mid-step. People around him slowed, their curiosity piqued. He turned, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Is there a problem, officer?" Jamal asked, his tone measured. "We've received reports of suspicious activity matching your description," the second officer replied, already reaching for his handcuffs. "Suspicious activity? I'm walking to a meeting," Jamal said, incredulous. "Keep your hands where I can see them," the officer snapped. Before Jamal could respond, he felt cold steel clamp around his wrists. "What are you doing?" "This is a mistake," he protested, his voice rising. But the officers ignored him, roughly steering him toward the patrol car. A small crowd gathered, murmurs of disbelief rippling through the onlookers. "Hey, leave him alone," shouted a young woman recording the incident on her phone. Jamal's heart raced as he was shoved into the back seat. He'd done nothing wrong, yet here he was, being treated like a criminal in broad daylight. At the precinct, the officers led Jamal into a sterile interrogation room. A single metal table and two chairs sat under harsh fluorescent lights. The officers didn't even bother to remove his cuffs as they seated him. "Let's cut to the chase," Officer Daniels said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We've been tracking a suspect involved in a series of thefts downtown, and you fit the description." Jamal's jaw tightened. "What description is that?" "A black man in a suit." Daniels smirked. "Smart mouth. We'll see how that works for you." "I'd like to call my lawyer," Jamal said firmly. "Oh, we'll get to that," Daniels replied dismissively. "But first, we have questions." For the next hour, Jamal endured a barrage of accusations. The officers presented no evidence, only vague claims that didn't hold up under scrutiny. Jamal remained composed, though his frustration simmered beneath the surface. He knew his rights, but he also knew how easily things could escalate if he pushed too hard. Just as Jamal was about to demand his phone call again, the door to the interrogation room burst open. A middle-aged man in a gray suit entered, his face pale and beads of sweat dotting his forehead. Behind him stood the precinct's captain, his expression grim. Officers Daniels and Miller, a word outside. "Now," the man in the suit barked. The officers exchanged puzzled glances but obeyed, leaving Jamal alone with the captain. "Mr. Anderson," the captain began, his tone markedly different from the one his subordinates had used. "I'm Captain Harris. I need to apologize for what's happened here." Jamal's eyes narrowed. "Apologize? I've been wrongfully arrested, humiliated in public, and accused of crimes I didn't commit. An apology doesn't cut it." "You're absolutely right," Harris admitted, his voice strained. "And I assure you, this will be addressed. But first, let me explain. There's been a significant misunderstanding." The door opened again, and the man in the gray suit stepped back in, holding a thick file. He placed it on the table in front of Jamal. "We ran your name through the system," the man said. "And well, let's just say you're not the kind of person we should have been arresting." Jamal's curiosity piqued despite his anger. "And who do you think I am?" The man cleared his throat. "You're Jamal Anderson, founder of Next Horizon Developments and one of the most prominent philanthropists in Atlanta. Your company has spearheaded initiatives that have provided housing for thousands of low-income families. And if that wasn't enough, you're also on the mayor's advisory board." Jamal leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He watched as the officers squirmed in their seats, realizing the gravity of their mistake. Word spread quickly through the precinct. Officers whispered in the halls, some glancing nervously at Jamal as he was finally uncuffed and escorted to the captain's office. The woman recording his arrest had posted the video online, and within hours, it went viral. The hashtags #JusticeForJamal and #AtlantaPD were trending on Twitter, sparking outrage across the nation. Outside the precinct, reporters clamored for statements. Jamal, his suit slightly wrinkled but his composure intact, stepped to the microphones. "What happened to me today is a reflection of a larger issue," he began, his voice steady but firm. "This is not just about me. It's about a system that continues to target people of color without cause. I'm fortunate to have the resources and platform to fight back, but many others don't. This needs to stop." The crowd erupted in applause, his words striking a chord with those who had witnessed the injustice firsthand. The backlash against the Atlanta Police Department was swift and unforgiving. Officers Daniels and Miller were placed on unpaid leave pending an investigation, and protests erupted outside City Hall demanding systemic reform. Jamal used the momentum to push for changes he'd long advocated for, including mandatory bias training for officers and increased oversight of police conduct. Weeks later, Jamal sat in the mayor's office, surrounded by community leaders and activists. They were there to sign a groundbreaking police reform bill, a direct result of his ordeal. "This is just the beginning," Jamal said as cameras flashed. "We have a long way to go, but today, we've taken an important step." Jamal's story became a symbol of resilience and change. It reminded the nation that even in moments of adversity, there's an opportunity to fight for justice. And while the scars of that day would never fully fade, Jamal found solace in knowing that his experience had sparked a movement. For those who had wronged him, the shame was inescapable. But for Jamal, his dignity remained intact, a testament to the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. Weeks after the viral arrest and the sweeping reforms, Jamal Anderson thought he had moved past the ordeal. His life had returned to a semblance of normalcy, and his focus was once again on his company's mission, building communities and empowering those most in need. However, one sunny afternoon, a knock on his office door would change everything. "Mr. Anderson," his assistant announced, peeking in, "there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." Jamal furrowed his brow. "Who is it?" "He didn't give a name," she replied, hesitating. "But he seems troubled." Curiosity piqued. Jamal nodded. "Send him in." The door opened to reveal a man in a plain polo shirt and jeans, his face pale and his hands trembling. Jamal recognized him immediately, Officer Daniels, one of the men who had arrested him. Jamal's posture stiffened, but his expression remained calm. "Officer Daniels," he said evenly. "This is unexpected." Daniels looked down, his voice shaky. "Mr. Anderson, I don't know how to say this, but I need your help." Jamal leaned back in his chair, studying the man before him. Daniels was a shadow of the arrogant officer he had encountered weeks ago. His shoulders sagged, and there was a flicker of desperation in his eyes. "You need my help?" Jamal asked, incredulous. "After what you did to me?" Daniels swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes. I know I don't deserve your time, but I've made some terrible choices, things I can't undo. My wife left me after the arrest went public. I lost my job. And now my son, he's sick." Jamal's expression softened slightly at the mention of a child. "What's wrong with your son?" Daniels hesitated, as if ashamed. "He has leukemia. The medical bills are piling up, and I can't afford the treatment he needs. I've gone to everyone I can think of, but no one will help me. Not after what happened." Jamal sat silently, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to turn Daniels away, to let him face the consequences of his actions. But another part of him, the part that had built his career on giving second chances, felt compelled to listen. "Why come to me?" Jamal finally asked. Daniels looked up, tears glistening in his eyes. "Because I've seen the kind of man you are. After everything I did, you didn't retaliate. You used what happened to make the city better. You're the only person I can think of who might still have compassion left for someone like me." The room fell silent as Jamal weighed his options. His chest tightened at the thought of a child suffering because of a parent's mistakes. Finally, he spoke. "I'll help your son," Jamal said firmly. "Not for you, but for him. No child should suffer because of an adult's failure." Daniels collapsed into the chair, relief washing over him. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you so much." But Jamal wasn't done. "There's one condition," he added. You're going to work for me. You'll join my community outreach program and dedicate yourself to making amends. You'll tell your story to show others what unchecked bias can lead to. And you'll do it without expecting a cent of pay until your debt is repaid. Daniels nodded vigorously, tears streaming down his face. Anything you need, Mr. Anderson. I'll do it. True to his word, Jamal covered the cost of the child's treatment, and Daniels threw himself into his new role. He became a powerful advocate for change, sharing his story with humility and honesty. Over time, his genuine remorse began to resonate with the community, and he found a new purpose in helping others. Months later, Jamal received an invitation to a hospital event celebrating the successful treatment of leukemia patients. Among the honorees was Daniel's son, now in remission. The boy ran up to Jamal and hugged him tightly, his small voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for saving me," the boy said. Jamal knelt, looking into the child's eyes. "You're welcome, kid. You've got a bright future ahead of you. Make it count." As Jamal left the hospital that day, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The same man who had once treated him with disdain now stood beside him, transformed by the power of grace and second chances. Jamal realized that his ordeal had not only brought change to the city, but had also healed the lives of those who had once been his adversaries. The city of Atlanta continued to evolve, inspired by the story of a black man who turned injustice into opportunity. And as for Jamal Anderson, he knew that his greatest legacy wasn't the buildings he constructed or the reforms he championed, but the lives he had touched, even those who had once wronged him.